I'm having a fabulous talk. This is the most amazing CD we're going to chat about. I'm speaking with Joanne Lazzaro, Los Angeles-based flutist, or should I say flutists, because she is a master of 18,000 zillion different flutes that we're going to types of flutes that we're going to talk about, including Native American flutes. She
Hmm.
has a wonderful ensemble that has just made a wonderful recording of a work by Catherine Hoover. We're going to talk about that. The CD came out this year. It was recorded in 2015. It's called Canyon Shadows. It has the most delicious artwork. It has the most delicious level of standard of quality recording. It's just marvelous, Joanne. And I know every flutist around should be picking up this CD and other
Thank you.
interested folks as well. It's just a very unique CD when we talk about it. So, the CD itself, if I may quote from your program magazine, just to
Mhm.
talk about Canyon Shadows, it combines several overlapping spheres, as you've written. Native flute, silver flute, native music, classical music, sounds of nature, notated music, everything. And also, let me ask this question: how about improvisation? Where is there? I presume there is some improvisation in this suite by Catherine Hoover.
So in this piece, the flute parts are written out fairly straightforward. There's a lot of leeway in the interpretation. However, the percussion parts, the three slow movements, are mostly improvised,
I wondered.
and the fast movements, every percussionist I've played it with has played something completely different than what was written.
Hmm,
So the original percussionist at the world premiere concert did not read music. So
interesting.
he improvised all the way through, all five movements. And it's my understanding that Catherine wrote down some of the things that she observed him do, and that wound up going into the score.
Interesting. Well, I was so curious because, of course, it has just a wonderful floating. I think we've talked a little earlier, kind of a magic realist feel to it. The imagery is incredible. We're going to talk about all of that. Help. The piece was commissioned by the Grand Canyon Music Festival.
Right.
Fabulous.
Mhm.
Fabulous festival. Premiered in 1999. You referred to the first performance. And it's taken a long while to get to a recording of this. And this is the world premiere recording of,
Yes, yes.
Help. Canyon Shadows. I'm seeing Grand Canyon all over the place, so I keep getting
It's
confused.
about the Grand Canyon, yes, in
Yeah,
fact.
duh. And it's a tremendously narrative piece in five movements. And then you add a little something at the end, three more tracks that are
Yes.
fabulous, and we're going to chat about them. Why don't you tell me a little bit about and by the way, Coco Pelli is your your
Website.
website,
Yeah.
and we've chatted. Coco Pelli is the fertility deity, and I think that speaks to
And
you in a
plays
sense.
the flute, right. Every
That's
culture
right.
has a Pied Piper, a flute
There you
player
go.
who makes people do things. So, yeah.
So tell me about your ensemble Dreamcatcher. First, please describe for everyone who isn't aware what exactly is a Dreamcatcher.
So, a dream catcher is it's a circular webbed shape artwork with the three feathers hanging down, and it comes from Native American culture. And the legend behind the dream catcher is that you hang this over your bed, and that at night, all dreams pass through the dream catcher, and the good dreams are smart and they filter down to the dreamer through the feathers. The bad dreams are trapped in the dream catcher, especially they're trapped by the little stone and they can't escape. And when the sun comes up, the bad dreams are burned away. So that
Ooh,
is the story behind what a dream catcher means. Originally, it was literally a catcher of dreams and a promoter of good dreams.
and I think a lot of people have seen Dreamcatchers, but not maybe
Yes.
recognized them. They're
Hmm.
quite. I've seen them. I didn't quite understand what they were until a bit ago. So, how about your colleagues? We have Terry Wolf, C flute and alto flute on this CD. Dean Hinckley playing mostly exotic native and otherwise percussion. Tell me, how did you guys? You got together in 2012 as Dreamcatcher, right?
Right. We knew each other from other performing groups that we played in. I play in a group called Pipe Dreams, which is a whole lot of flute players, and an assortment of percussionists and other people. And Terry was one of the other flute players. I've known her for many years. And Dean is especially his timpani and mallet percussion, but he gets around on all sorts of fabulous auxiliary percussion as well. And we started working together, especially playing Native American flute and percussion improvisations, because one of the traditions with the Native American flute is most of the time the music is not written down. And what's unusual about Canyon Shadows is that Catherine Hoover tried to write a part for a Native American flute player to play, and there's a big story behind that as well. So Terry and I did a lot of improvisation. It always helps to have a percussionist with you, and Dean is really fabulous at following a groove and following cues and being creative with world percussion. Terry's background in jazz really enabled her to do some pitch matching and vibrato effects, so that she would match the Native American flute. Catherine and I had long discussions about the pitch and the scale of Native American flute is completely different than
G
concert.
minor or something. What's the tonality
Um,
of it?
it's so it's G minor, but it's not really concert tuned. It's closer to just intonation, which makes getting around some of the sharps and flats and naturals a little weird. Um, so so because Terry had, an equal background playing Native American flute, and from her jazz background was really good at things like pitch bending and holding back on vibrato and things like that. She was a good match to play the classical flute part, because the classical flute part is really being played in a world flute style. She's having to do some pitch bending to follow me along in the keys. She's adjusting her vibrato or taking vibrato out to match how you would play the Native American flute part. Um, and then Dean, because he was so used to playing with us and improvising, he was really good at picking up sort of the pictorial storytelling aspects of Canyon Shadows. And so some of his interpretations, for example, the thunder, Catherine had just written these, non-pitched crescendo, decrescendo markings, with different crescendos and decrescendos for each hand. And I asked her what she meant by that, and she says, I think he was playing two different drums, but I don't remember. So Dean looked at that and he thought, oh, and he played these sounds and they were very dramatic, and they worked really well. And I didn't realize until I went to do the remixing with the nature sounds that he was playing thunder. Exactly, he was playing thunder. So just we had such a good rapport working together, and we knew how to capture the style of Native American and Native American-ish and world music, and just get into that non-classical groove. So that's what Dreamcatcher was really good at.
And I go on ad nauseum, but Gunther Schuller is rising from the dead with joy. His whole idea of this third way, I can never quite remember what that second word
Mhm.
is, but this third way, I'm seeing it all the time now in the course of my interviewing and reviewing all these fabulous CDs, including yours, that come my way. So
Yes.
many classically trained musicians are now really becoming Mozarts again. You know what I mean? Free improvisation. They're incredibly skilled at it. It wasn't in my curriculum when I was in
Mhm.
college. So the world has changed greatly. And by the way, your college, you're all three Los Angeles based, and it sounds it. You know what I'm saying? Not only the
Yeah.
quality of the music making, but this capacity to bend and move and curve and jive and do all that. As you mentioned with Dean, I'm imagining he can play a symphony gig and then do a studio job and then do other stuff, film music, and so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just a wonderful world in Los Angeles. Um, we're talking flutes and more flutes. It's time. Give me a rundown of the various incredible instruments that people are going to experience on this CD.
So I'm playing a Native American flute in G minor. On the echo movement, I'm playing a Native American flute in D minor. And I also play an eagle bone whistle. It's kind of a replica, but it's pitched to make more musical notes. So I'm playing those three flutes. Terry's playing concert flute in C and alto flute on the movement that I'm playing with the D minor Native American flute. And Dean is playing just an amazing assortment of, you know, doumbek and tambourines and shakers and rattles and brushes and these rattly little seed pod things that I'm told are caterpillar cocoons strung into a little cluster. Um,
Wow.
those little wooden cricket frog creatures that sound like, crickets or frogs at night. So, he got out the whole gamut of world instruments. There's a wind chime on there. We had a discussion. We had an interesting discussion with Catherine. In one movement, she had written the words sleigh bells, and so we did a rehearsal recording of it over at Dean's house, and he dutifully gets out a set of sleigh bells like you would use in an orchestra. And when the part came for sleigh bells, he's jingling along on the shape sleigh bells, and I played this back with Catherine, and we got to the sleigh bell. She goes, "Oh my God, what are those?" I said, "They're sleigh bells." She says, "Oh no, those sound like doorbells. No, 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 no." She said, it's something else, something softer and more organic and more delicate. So Dean went back to the drawing board and did Chime Tree. And, that works really well. Um, uh, but I think, every world percussionist has their own idea of what sort of sound effects they like and what might suit the mood, not just the mood of the pieces but the mood of the performers, the mood of the audience, their own experiences with things that happen outdoors and things that go bump in the night. They bring their own experiences out in nature to that.
And you have described for me in my imagination, I can just see him going to a big closet in his house somewhere,
Yeah,
throw him and throwing stuff out
yeah.
until he finds exactly what he wanted. And by the way, dutiful professional. It said sleigh
Hmm.
bells. He pulled out his sleigh
Right.
bells.
Yeah,
Come on.
sleigh bells. Oh yeah. Oh
Let's
yeah.
talk about the cover art, which is so gorgeous, but also has an incredible, amazing story. And then we'll talk about the narrative of these five movements. How can you remind us all about that beautiful cover art?
So the painting is by a Flagstaff artist named Erica Ferreo. She is a Grand Canyon river guide
Hmm.
and a painter. And I was in Flagstaff shortly after I had finished the studio recording, and I was walking around in a gallery and I saw some of her work on the walls. And they also had a bin full of, little prints of the paintings as well. And I went through the bin and I saw the painting of Mergence, and I looked at that and I said, without even like reading the back or reading anything about her, I said, that's the album cover for Canyon Shadows. It wasn't until I read the back, um, and read all the information, I didn't realize that was about the Grand Canyon, that it's a spot in the Grand Canyon where two rivers come together. And according to the Hopi tribe, that is the source of their civilization. Um, so, she had painted this very special spot in the Grand Canyon. And, when Catherine had visited the Grand Canyon, she had sort of a very similar experience, visiting with the Hopi and learning about their culture and their music. And it just seemed that bringing together a painter who was a Grand Canyon river guide with this piece that was written about the Grand Canyon would be perfect. So, I bought a print, I had it shipped home, and I basically just had it hanging in my house. And when it came time to finish the album, I thought, I should find out if I can use this as an album cover. So I contacted Erica and, said I'd love the painting. I'd love to use it for the album, sent her the music so she would sort of understand what it was being used for. And, I licensed it from her. She was deliriously happy, both it being asked and for being paired, with this particular piece of music. So, I just found that her vision and her writings and her understanding of the Hopi really um, corresponded and was compatible with Catherine Hoover's experience when she was out at the Grand Canyon as well. So the two things just came together beautifully.
And talk about how that, I mean, how that happens, the magic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of, things happen when they're supposed to happen. You came
Right.
upon that artwork, had not really, not intentionally, but just came upon
No,
it,
I
and then,
just I just walked into that art gallery and there it was.
well, this suite is so is just well, I guess I'm trying to give. Then you'll tell us about these movements, but it's a beautifully. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous CD. It's the kind of CD people should be putting on to kind of relax and kind of get away from the world and its conundrums and trials and whatnot. And it isn't five movements. Let's start. Let me read the five movements, and then
Sure.
you can kind of give us a little rundown on. First movement, searching, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a wonderful narrative. Searching, moving in,
Mm-hmm.
echo. Loved that movement. Celebration, and the simply stunning dusk. Go.
So the whole story behind the five movements is Catherine was describing an origin story. She imagined what it would have been like for the original tribe of people to be wandering through the desert, looking for a new home. And, when you're out in the desert of the American Southwest, you can see an awful lot of dry rocks and dry dirt. And it doesn't look like there's anything hospitable until you follow a canyon up into its source. And then you realize that's where the water is. That's where the trees are, and the birds, and the plants, and the fish. Everything is hiding way down in these enormous canyons. So the first movement describes the search. It's a lot of sort of musical wandering around. There's a lot of melodies that sound like sort of flying birds, like a bird's eye view. Like if you were to send your um, your senses out and let the birds tell you where the home is, where the water source is. So I think there's a lot of bird elements in that movement. And it ends with this, sort of rising melodic motive, which is literally how you can be in a very dry canyon and turn around a corner and come up, and suddenly this paradise, this oasis opens up before you, and you realize you've arrived. So, searching definitely ends with that sense of, voila, we found it, we've discovered it. Um, so, moving in, it took me a while to figure out what was going on with moving in because it felt very plodding and inelegant. And I thought about this and I thought about it. Why does it sound so plodding and inelegant? And I realized that one of the musical motives, remembering that Catherine has perfect pitch, I thought these are burros. These are the sounds of burros making little grunting noises and braying noises. This is the tempo of trudging. These are heavily laden burros and heavily laden people um, trudging down into the canyon, carrying all their
Fascinating.
belongings, with all of the pushing and pulling of the burrows and the slipping and sliding on the rocks. And she captured all of that struggle and difficulty in the music.
Wow, I'm going to have
And
to re-listen to that
yeah.
movement. Thank you for that.
That was my interpretation. She thought, okay, yeah, sounds good.
That's
I
composers
think
for
that
you.
right,
They never
right,
really tell you much. They just agree. Yeah,
right.
okay. You
They
see.
don't always tell you everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then echoes. Um, One thing that all players of Native American flute love to do is go find a canyon somewhere that has some really spectacular echo and play and hear the sound come back at them. And so when Catherine wrote this movement, she had the classical flute and the Native American flute take turns, which one is the call and which one is the echo. And so we go back and forth
That
who's
explains a lot to me in terms of
Mhm.
what I heard.
Right,
That
right.
explains
You,
a
you
lot. Yeah.
take right, you take turns. And the other thing um, that I felt in that movement, even though she never said it and never wrote it, echoes are supposed to be sort of exact repetitions of what you just did. I mean, it's very mathematical. It's the laws of, physics and acoustics. But yet, when she wrote it, some of the echoes were a little bit different than what was originally played. Sometimes they overlapped in a predictable manner, sometimes they didn't. And the other thing is, getting a Native American flute and a classical flute to match pitch exactly on an echo is very, very, very hard because the Native American flute, just like the Baroque recorder, you play soft, it goes flat, you play loud, it goes sharp. Um, so, you know, there was always this little bit of dissonance where the echo was just not the same. It was close but not the same. And as I was listening to this and mixing it, I started thinking about the subsequent mixing of Native American culture into American culture and how fraught with difficulty that was, and the fact that the Native American way of life, even though they tried to mirror a European way of life, it was never the same. There was always like this dissonance, this disconnect between the Native American way of life and their perspective on a lot of things and the introduced European way of life and perspective on those same things. So in that third movement is where the dissonance starts to come in. The fact that the Native American flute can never be fully European and the European flute can never fully match the Native American. They will try to be the same, but they're not.
That is brilliant. Go ahead. I dare you. Tell me about Dusk, the final movement.
Well, I don't want to skip celebration. Um,
Oh, I guess I did.
this
Yeah,
is
sorry, I forgot to put it in. Yeah,
so
celebration.
celebration is the thing that happens in the evening. They've finally moved in. They celebrate. Some people have said that the the tonality and the characterization of Native American music and Native American dancing. Some people think it sounds um, a little bit bright or stereotypical, but that's looking at it, 20 years down the road. I mean, back in 1999, that was new, and a lot of Native American music, hadn't really been brought out
Hmm.
into the greater musical world. That was early in Carlos Nakai's recording career as well. So, she was one of the first people to try to write that down. So now we think, oh, well, it's commonplace or it's been done, but she was back there being among the first. So it does sound sort of very stereotypical Native American, those tonalities, the dancing, the beating of the drum, and yet you know, she wrote what she heard, and made a very ornate and technically challenging piece. Especially that movement is the most technically challenging for Native American flute and for Native American
Oh,
flute players. For classical musicians, you look at a bunch of 16th notes and you get out a metronome and a tuner and you just, you work it out. That's breakfast, work it out with a metronome. For Native American flute players, that's a whole lot of somebody else's notes to play. um, and you have to play them right because there's two other people playing along, with you, and you're trying to all end at the same time. Um, so that's sort of the most raucous of the movements. And then dusk was meant to be the sounds of the desert at night, and everything is human is starting to quiet down, and everything animal and spirit is starting to come alive in the evening. And in her program notes, she talks about sort of chirps and murmurs, and bats and memories. And I realize she's talking about things you can hear when you can't see them, things that you can no longer see, and things that you can never see with your eyes, only with the spirit. And so she said,
Can you hold for a minute? I'm in downtown
"Sure,
Santa Barbara, and a fire engine or something is about to go by. Let me chat at you.
sure,
Here it goes. Life in the big city. You
uh-huh."
should know about that, even in Los Angeles. Please forgive me for interrupting. Would you like to conclude the thoughts about dusk?
Yeah, so with Dusk, she had written all of these very loosely notated little murmurs and chirps and figures, and this was a movement where I wasn't sure what exactly she was getting at. I gave Dean just free rein to do whatever kinds of percussion sounds that he wanted. And, Terry and I work together on some of these chirps and murmurs. The two flutes are together, and sometimes they're alternating. Um, and some of them in particular, we thought, well, what noise is this? Especially the bleep, 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 bleep. And we thought, we played it, but it's sort of very atonal. It has no tonal orientation whatsoever, that we could recognize. And I thought, well, classical composer, she can, write what she wants. But still in the back of my mind, I was thinking, she has perfect pitch. She's remembering something. She's remembering something. So my goal to move on to the three remixes
I'm so glad I was
was,
getting ready
yeah,
to go there.
exactly.
That's how come I got a little confused. That's my alibi
Right,
about
right.
celebrating. But you remixed Searching, Echo, and Dusk.
Right. Those were the three slow ones. Those were the ones that seemed to have the most sound effects. So, you know, we did the remix on day two of the mixing session, and I had written down little notes in the score where I wanted to mix in specific sound effects, like where I wanted footsteps at the beginning of Searching, and real eagle calls, in addition to the played eagle calls, and then real canyon birds, and the sound of water and the sound of wind. And so, you know, we put all of those into Searching, so you really got the sound of walking up to a canyon, and finding it. And then for Echo, once again, I wanted the sounds of being in the canyon with the water and the canyon birds. And I said, okay, what always happens in the afternoon in the late summer is, you can get those tropical thunderstorms that happen in the desert only in the summer. So what happens in the afternoon is you get thunder. You might not get rain, but you get thunder off in the distance. And so the whole those drum rolls in the beginning of Echo that sound sort of like, who's interrupting this beautiful flute duet with a bunch of, loud banging drums. Well, that's the thunder. And if you lay the sound of actual thunder in with the thunder that Dean played, it's a perfect match. It's just a perfect match. Um, so that was a surprising thing that we found when we laid in the thunder, was Dean had actually played thunder exactly the way it happens, the way it rolls and builds and fades. Um, so I was pretty happy about that because the thunder had laid in really nicely. And then we get to dusk, and I had written in my notes. In addition, there's going to be, the Eagles come back or they leave. They sort of make their last pass for the evening, and I know it's going to be raining by the end, so we're going to put in some more of the real thunder. But I said, in the meantime, what you always hear in the desert at night is coyotes. So I had, made little notes I'd picked out coyote sounds the day before, so I made little notes, put coyotes here, put coyotes there. And so I'm listening along in the headphones and hear bleep, 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 and I say coyotes. He drops in the coyotes, and you hear the coyotes going bleep, 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 bleep. And I'm just like, ah, that's what she wrote. That strange little atonal phrase that didn't make any sense. That is the sound of coyotes yipping.
Let me jump in for a second, so everybody knows. First of all, and by the way, Catherine, I assume was not outraged that you played a little bit with these
No,
mixes and
she
sound.
loved it. She
Yeah,
loved it.
I love it too, by the way. And I just want everybody to know what really struck me was how subtle these additions are. You know what I mean? Some mixers could make a great deal out of it, but these
We
are so subtle. Go tell me, by the way, the
we
fellow who
had
helped you.
so Todd Boston is a genius, and I'm gonna plug him here in
Please.
his studio, Magic Cottage Studio. He's a incredibly talented new age artist, plays guitar and the hang drum and a whole bunch of flutes. Um, and he's really got a sense for that atmospheric dream state quality. And so when we were mixing in the sounds, we had long discussions about, how loud should the sounds be, and we came to the sort of the general agreement we wanted them to be more or less about as loud as they would be in nature, with the exception of the thunder. We toned that down because actually when you have thunder like really close by, it shakes the rafters, and we didn't want people to be like ripping their earbuds off, um, or jumping for the mute button when the thunder came in at like actual earth shaking volume. So we made the thunder, stay more in the distance so it would be a comfortable listening environment. And we talked about the coyotes for at least like 30 minutes. Um, because, when you hear coyotes in real life, they're always very far in the distance. It's a very faint beep, 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 off in the hills. And I didn't want the coyotes to be so faint that you couldn't hear them. And in a noisy listening environment, you won't hear them. They'll kind of fade into the background. But if you're listening in a quiet room, or if you're listening with headphones, you'll definitely hear the coyotes. And if you listen with headphones, you'll hear them travel from one side to the other across the sound space. Because in real life, the coyotes are traveling, and you hear them on one hill, then you hear them on another hill,
Mm.
and then they're gone. So we really talked about the levels, making the coyotes loud enough to be heard, but not so loud that it would sound like they were in your room. um, and and just the entrance and the roll off of the thunder, and the entrance and the roll off of the rain. We really talked about the shape of the fade in Pro Tools. You had a fade that went like this, and I said, no, I want a fade that goes like this. Um,
You've mentioned
just
standing over his shoulder, trying not to
mhm.
drive him crazy.
Right. He was a person that I knew. I knew him as a friend before that, and I thought, okay, this is a person that can tolerate, a producer with not a whole lot of experience standing over their shoulder saying, okay, can you do it a little bit more like this and a little bit more like that? Can you change this fade? So, and the shape of the fade makes a big difference in your perspective of certain kinds of sound effects. That linear fade
Mm.
doesn't work when you're trying to sort of recreate a specific reality. So, someone who can put up with 2 days of that. Todd was really great about that, and I think the results speak for themselves, because we got the balance between the two flutes and the percussion really well. We got those sound effects set in there, so that they really bring out sort of that dream quality, that magical reality. Um, you know, I was even toying for a little bit by having only 5 tracks on the album, and having the sound effects remix versions as 1, 3, and 5, and then the straight concert versions as 2 and 4. And then I thought, no, the straight concert version, the way you would hear it if you played it on stage, that should stand on its own, and then
Absolutely.
have the three remixes, as bonus tracks, um, so that you could
Very good.
compare, and yet I think that the three remixes are actually my favorite, on the album, because that's where you realize the genius of some of the stuff she wrote, and how she really captured a very visual and sonic environment, with what she wrote. And I think with a little help with laying in those actual sound effects, it completely takes you there.
Yeah.
If you weren't transported the first time around, the second time around, you say, oh, now I get it.
Also, it's very, very intelligent what you've done, as you've just described, allowing the piece to stand alone, and
Hmm.
then offering the mixed versions of
Hmm.
those three movements, as you said,
Right.
so people can really start to hear even better
Hmm.
Catherine Hoover had in mind. We're running on 35 minutes. I was going to talk to you about the Los Angeles World Flute Conference, or what is it called? Just give me the name again.
Los Angeles World Flute Circle.
Circle. There you
So,
go. Yeah. How
yes.
about very briefly, and then we'll wind it down, or I'll
Okay.
be in trouble with
So,
impatient people.
a tradition with Native American flute players, and also quite a few other kinds of musicians like drummers,
Yeah.
is to have these group events called circles, and basically all levels of ability are welcome. We have everyone from complete beginners at Native American flute or Irish flute or whatever they're trying to learn, to professionals and guest artists, and everybody gets together. There's no reading from sheet music. You learn to improvise, or you play from memory, or you learn to jam with other people. We usually have a few drummers that show up, so they, help keep the groove to organize people. And so it's my way of giving back to the community, and getting more people into Native American flutes and world flutes in an educational, non-threatening environment.
Exactly right, by the way. Bravo. And I've been at drum circles.
It's
At
very
first,
similar.
I'm Mr. Classical,
Hmm.
all my life, until I started reviewing all these wonderful CDs. I've mellowed considerably in my old age. But these things are very, very important for people to come together, to have an experience together, and to keep it free flowing and creative and improvisatory. I finally get it. At 70 years of age, I finally get it. Listen, Joanne Lazzaro, we're going to have to shut it down here. I want to just let everybody know that my interview with you is going to go up at performingartsreview.net, and there are going to be pictures. There are excerpts from the CD. We're going to have, this is Catherine Hoover's Canyon Shadows, plus your extra wonderful remixings of three of the movements up at it's all going to be up at performingartsreview.net, together with a link to your website, and where and how to buy the CD and all that good stuff. So I want to thank you very, very much for giving me some time today. I can't wait to get this up, and I'll also be writing a review of the CD. It'll be easy.
Oh, thank
Brilliant,
you.
brilliant. It's so clean and clear and so calming and just so everything that we need now in
Thank you.
society. Joanne, thanks very much indeed for giving me a few minutes of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. I enjoyed talking with you.
Good. We'll see you then.